Hello, today I'd like to introduce to you one of my favorite authors who has influenced my life very profoundly and who I like to come back to regularly to see how he's doing. It's this guy, Jack Kerouac. He died when he was 47. I'm soon 45, so it's like meeting an older brother. Meeting an older brother who will be my role model probably for the rest of my life. And he's also like an alter ego, and his voice really reverberates, and there is like there's like an echo. There's like a deep connection with him. So the book I'm gonna introduce with the Buddha statue in the city and the big mountain is called The Dharma Bums. From Wikipedia, The Dharma Bums is a 1958 novel by Beat Generation author Jack Kerouac. The basis for the novel's semi-fictional accounts are events occurring years after the events of On the Road. On the Road was from 1957, or was published then. The main characters are the narrator Ray Smith, based on Kerouac, and J.F. Ryder, based on the poet and essayist Gary Snyder, who was instrumental in Kerouac's introduction to Buddhism in the mid-1950s. And I selected a passage from chapter 3, where Jack Kerouac, alias Ray Smith, goes to visit J.F. Ryder, alias Gary Snyder. Okay. What are you doing? Translating Han Shan's great poem called Cold Mountain, written 1,000 years ago, some of it scribbled on the sides of cliffs hundreds of miles away from any other living being. Wow. When you come into this house, though, you've got to take your shoes off. See those straw mats? You can ruin them with shoes. So I took my soft-soled blue cloth shoes off and laid them dutifully by the door. And he threw me a pillow, and I sat cross-legged along the little wooden board wall. And he offered me a cup of hot tea. "Did you ever read the Book of Tea?" said he. "No, what's that?" "It's a scholarly treatise on how to make tea, utilizing all the knowledge of 2,000 years about tea brewing. Some of the descriptions of the effect of the first sip of tea and the second and the third are really wild and ecstatic. Those guys got high on nothing, hey? Sip your tea and you'll see. This is a good green tea." It was good, and I immediately felt calm and warm. Want me to read you parts of this Han Shan poem? Want me to tell you about Han Shan? Yeah. Han Shan, you see, was a Chinese scholar who got sick of the big city and the world and took off to hide in the mountains. Say, that sounds like you. In those days, you could really do that. He stayed in caves not far from a Buddhist monastery in the Tangxing district of Tiantai, and his only human friend was the funny Zen lunatic Shi Te, who had a job sweeping out the monastery with a straw broom. Shi Te was a poet too, but he never wrote much down. Every now and then, Han Shan would come down from the cold mountain in his bark clothing and come into the warm kitchen and wait for food. But none of the monks would ever feed him because he didn't want to join the order and answer the meditation bell 3 times a day. You see why in some of his utterances, like, listen and I look here and read from the Chinese. And I bent over his shoulder and watched him read from big wild crow tracks of Chinese signs. Climbing up cold mountain path. Cold mountain path goes on and on. Long gorge choked with scree and boulders. Wide creek and mist-blurred grass. Moss is slippery, though there's been no rain. Pine sings, but there's no wind. Who can leap the world's ties and sit with me among white clouds? Wow. Wow.